Hey everybody, my name is Brendan Noble and I'm a young adult author. Welcome back to my Slavic Saturday series where we talk about Slavic history, mythology, and folklore. This week we're talking about Noc Kupały, or a Kupala night, depending on which language you're looking at. It's one of the most famous festivals in Slavic folklore and history that's even celebrated today. I'm a week late with it because I got my calendar mixed up because it's supposed to be on the summer solstice, which was last week, but close enough. So Kupala Night is such a traditional holiday that it has been celebrated for potentially over 1,500 years in Slavic tradition, especially in countries such as Russia, Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine, which are especially the northern Slavic countries. And this just shows how long running this tradition has been. It goes back to some of the earliest Slavic tribes, potentially even back to the 4th and 5th centuries. We don't have written evidence back then, but we do have some pottery evidence that shows that this celebration was been going on for that long. And even when Christian missionaries came, they saw how important this holiday was to the Slavic people, and they couldn't get rid of it, so they just kind of merged it with St. John's Day and just kind of let it go on because it's that powerful. But what is Kupala Night, and why is it so powerful? Why is it so important in Slavic folklore? A lot of cultures have celebrations around the summer solstice, but a lot of them aren't as integral to their culture as Kupala Night is to the Slavic one. And it can be hard to know exactly why, but we can kind of look into the name of the festival for some evidence of how the traditions got started and then starting to understand why this had such a significance to the Slavs. So, in the name Kupala is kind of related to the god Kupalo, who is a Slavic god who's the son of Simargal, who is a very famous fire god who has a long story of his own. But Kupalo had a twin sister named Kostroma, and the two were very close, and they were known to explore the woods together near rivers and things. But one time, Kupalo had heard the song of a siren, which is a half woman, half bird creature in Slavic mythology. And it's believed that whoever hears the song of the siren and follows it will die and be sent to Navia, which is the underworld in Slavic myth. And this happens to Kupalo, and while he's gone, Kostroma grows up on her own, and then there comes a day when she's older and she creates a flower wreath, wears it around on her head, and brags that nothing could ever take it off her head. And this meant it was kind of a boast to the gods and everyone else, saying she'll never have to be wed, she's independent. And this angered the gods, especially Perun, the god of thunder, and Strizbog, the god of the winds, and they called a storm and blew the wreath off her head into the river. It floated downstream, and Kupalo had now returned from Navia, and he had found the wreath downstream, not knowing that it was his sister's. And in the by Slavic tradition, they were then married, and the story ends poorly for both of them not liking being married to their twin, but it does show some of the tradition and potentially the origins of some of the festival activities. And especially the one is a famous one of the wreath ceremony, where or unmarried girls would wear these wreaths all day during the festival activities. And then even when evening came, they would place them in the river. The wreaths would float downstream, and the boys would jump in and try to grab a wreath from one of the girls, and it was thought of that they would be kind of destined to fall in love if the boy grabbed their wreath. And this is kind of the start of the idea of Kupala Night being a kind of Slavic Valentine's Day, because the large element of it is a fertility rite, and this is kind of the first part of that, in which this thought they would fall in love because of this festival. And then there would be considered a ritual bathing, because they were not supposed to bathe for at least 2 weeks before this. Bathing was also less common back then, but there would be the bathing ritual then. And it was thought that if you were inattentive during this bathing ritual in the river, you could be dragged away by Rusalki or other demons. So it was kind of a test of courage as well. And you'd probably be distracted because a lot of them were bathing communally. But then after this, there's many other rituals involving kind of this connection between the unmarried boys and girls, where there would be a building of massive bonfires, and they'd be dancing around the bonfires and singing, and there'd be some often sexual games. And then the boys and girls would often, the couples would join hands and try to jump the bonfire together, and if they succeeded, it was considered good for the relationship. If they failed, it was considered bad. And then following this, the girls would go into the woods and the boys would be thought to follow, and it doesn't take much looking into it to kind of think about what happened in the woods, because this is the first kind of ritual and the only ritual that's really considered okay in Slavic history and folklore, where the sexual activities outside of marriage was considered okay. It was very traditional society in that aspect, so the fact that this was allowed is kind of interesting, and it shows why it was so celebrated back then, because a lot of the boys and girls got to have fun they didn't have other types of the year. And if this wasn't enough, there's still another activity during the midnight hours of Kupala night, and that is the search for the fire fern, or the fire flower. This is especially popular in Polish folklore, and the people who went on the search for this, it was considered a very dangerous journey. It was thought that this flower had magic qualities. Whoever found it would be able to find treasure. They would be able to ward off evil. They would be able to read minds. So that's a pretty valuable prize. But one, it was hard to find. It only bloomed at midnight. And to reach it, you had to climb the stalk. You had to draw a circle around the fern and then climb its stalk while demons were tempting you the entire time. And if you ever looked away from the fern or stopped on your goal, the demons would kill you. So it was kind of a difficult and hard journey that would show up to a lot of stories here. But again, it's another element that shows how important this night was to them. On top of that, herbs and other things that were collected during Kupala night were considered to be more powerful and have magical elements to them. Even the dew on the morning after Kupala night was considered to be magical, and girls would run through the meadows barefoot, thinking that the magic from it would make them more likely to get married. Farmers would bring their cattle and other animals through it, thinking that the dew would make their cattle more healthy. So there is a lot in this, and it's amazing to see how many traditions follow through that and why some of them have carried around today. And the ones today are often the less sexualized ones, but things like the reefs getting floated downstream are often continued today. The fire jumps are often continued. And for my book series, which I will be announcing the name of the first book publicly on Tuesday, so stay tuned either here, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the announcement of that. I am not sure exactly how I'm going to involve Kupala night in my stories. It's not there yet in the first book, just time-wise in the year, but it is such an important part of the Slavic year and there's so many magical elements around it, it's just right for using in Slavic myth. I'm kind of excited to see how it works out and how I can manage to integrate some of it into the story, but I'm not sure yet. And that's all I have for you today on our Slavic Saturday series. Make sure you like and subscribe down below if you enjoy this series. And remember to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where I'll be posting the announcement of the first book in the series. And I'll also be doing a quick thing here as well. So see you guys next week.